I stumbled across this article on my way to Barnes and Noble. Weirdly enough, I was just scrolling through Google News, and this headline jumped out at me: higher taxes on millionaires? Question mark. Trump says he's open, but many in his party are not. I don't believe that Trump is open to higher taxes on millionaires. I actually know. I know for a fact he's not. Because do you know who gave him hundreds of millions of dollars over the last election cycle? People who would be negatively impacted by any higher taxes on the wealthy. Elon Musk, Tim Apple, Mark Zuckerberg. Trump has tried to adopt populist rhetoric, but there's nothing in his policy prescription that boosts that. He's just saying what he thinks the base wants him to say. Courtesy of the Associated Press, why not tax the millionaires? As Congress begins drafting a massive package for President Trump's big, beautiful bill with trillions of dollars in tax breaks and federal program cuts, it's a question that won't seem to go away. Trump himself has mused that he'd quote unquote love to tax wealthier Americans a little bit more, but the Republican president has also repeatedly walked it back. This week, the president dismissed the tax hike as disruptive when asked about it at the White House, but it swirls. And it's setting up a potential showdown between the old guard of the Republican Party, which sees almost any tax hike as contrary to the GOP's goal of slashing government, and its rising populist nationalists who view a millionaire's tax as championing working class people who helped deliver the White House. Bring it, baby, said former Trump strategist Stephen Bannon on his podcast. Why did Associated Press go full government? I will say this. There is a I can't confidently say the size of MAGA, who is anti-wealthy, who does not like rich people. It is a very prominent portion of it, and for obvious reasons. These folks who live in rural areas in the Rust Belt, in the Bible Belt, have seen firsthand the devastation of outsourcing and the ramifications of the capitalist class going in and sending all of their jobs overseas, closing steel mills and coal plants and manufacturing facilities all across the country. And these people are resentful. They are rightfully resentful. They don't have any job prospects. They don't have jobs with good wages, good benefits, with the potential to join a union. The cost of living is going up. The cost of groceries is going up. The cost of housing is going up, all at a time when wealth inequality is at the highest point since the Gilded Age. I would say there is more wealth inequality in the United States today than there was in France leading up to the French Revolution. Working class people want some of that. They want to be able to live comfortable and fulfilling lives. Part of this is why Trump adopted populist messaging and populist rhetoric in both of his campaigns. However, the Republican propaganda apparatus demonizes trans people, immigrants, marginalized communities as the reason why these folks' lives are so shitty. They, however, subconsciously recognize that the wealthy play a role in that. They think that it's, yes, trans people and immigrants and the wealthy, when in reality, it is just the wealthy. The 1% is exclusively to blame for the rapid transfer of wealth and for the severe shrinkage of the middle class here in the United States of America. Think of it as Bannon on one side versus Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich. Anti-tax crusader Grover Norquist. That is an evil-ass name. That is a robber baron name if I've ever seen one. I can totally see Grover Norquist being a fucking, like, being a banking magnate in the United States in 1917, a debate that once seemed unfathomable for Republicans who have spent generations working to lower taxes and reduce the scope of federal government. I don't think we're raising taxes on anybody, said House Speaker Mike Johnson this week on Fox News. That's just objectively untrue. That's objectively not true. This current round of tax cuts will transfer $1.1 trillion worth of wealth to the 1%. The average earner, or not even the average earner, anyone from the bottom 20 to like the middle 60% of earners will see a tax cut of somewhere between like, I think it's like 1% and 2%, give or take. I mean, a tax hike, pardon me, I think I said tax cut. You're raising taxes on low and middle income earners. That's how this goes. Whenever you reduce the taxes on wealthy people, you either directly or indirectly force lower and middle income earners to spend more money or have more money taken out on their taxes. Anyone who says otherwise is lying to you. Mike Johnson is a fucking liar. He knows full well that working class people are going to get fucked by this recent tax bill, but he doesn't care. Johnson said there have been a lot of ideas thrown out, but the Republicans are working against the idea of a tax on millionaires. Quote, I'm not in favor of raising the tax rates because our party is the group that stands against that traditionally. I hate these fucking people. I hate these fucking people so much. They stand by that because they are fucking bought by the wealthy people to stand by that. Like Mike Johnson does not give a fuck about anything. He only gives a fuck about who his paycheck is coming from. And if his handlers and his sponsors are saying, don't raise my taxes, you fucking manlet, you 5'6" piece of shit, don't raise my fucking taxes. Are you serious? Raise the taxes on the single mom who works as a bank teller in Louisiana, making fucking $30,000 a year. This spring and summer, the Republican-led Congress is determined to make progress on the package, which is central to the party's domestic policy agenda. It revolves around expanding many of the GOP tax cuts that Congress approved in 2017 during Trump's first term, but are expiring later this year. Yeah, a tax bill that was fucking historic almost in how much it benefited the 1%. The number varies, but anywhere between like 80 to 90% of the benefits of that tax cut went to the 1%. For lower and middle income earners, additionally, they did see a little bit of tax relief, but that was temporary. That was set to sunset, and it is going to sunset. The taxes on the wealthy, however, were permanent. Permanent. As in, wealthy people were not going to see the tax rate get higher. They were going to continue to earn more money. As it stands, the top individual tax rate is now 37% on annual incomes above $611,000 for single filers and $767,000 for married couples. If Congress fails to act, that rate is set to revert to what it was before the 2017 tax law, a staggering 39.6%. We should go back to the days of higher marginal tax rates. And I'm talking like considerably higher. Take that 37% and make it like, I don't know, 60%. I really don't give a fuck if all these, these high income earners piss and shit themselves. Like, I don't care. Get fucked, loser. You have a lot of money. You've benefited from society more than other people. Yeah, put some of your money back into the system so that way people can at least have paved roads so that way they can get to work. If we're talking about like millionaires, if you're making like above $3 million a year, I think that 90% of every dollar that you make over $3 million should be taxed. I don't care. I'm sorry. At a time when there is historic wealth inequality, there's historic income inequality, at a time when there are 40,000 people who die every year because they don't have health insurance, at a time when 1 in 7 children doesn't know where the next meal is going to come from. Yeah, I'm a little bit more radical on tax policy because, again, these people have benefited tremendously from the system and they deserve to give more back to the system. They would not have the ability to make all of this money if it weren't for government infrastructure that was put in place, right? If it weren't for the like literally it goes down to like the roads and the electricity. It gets a little bit, deeper when you talk about like business licenses and licensing. If you're a doctor or a lawyer, like that's all government sanctioned. Like you would not be able to make all of this money without the government like allowing it. So yeah, pay up a little bit more. It seems impossible that Republicans in Congress will purposefully wade into the debate. They are striving to keep all the existing tax brackets in place while adding new tax breaks the president campaigned on during the 2024 election, including no taxes on tips, Social Security, income, overtime pay, and others. It's potentially a $5 trillion plus package. Key distinction here: there are going to be cuts to Medicaid in this package. The no tax on tips is not going to make or break anyone's earnings. You're going to get like a couple more thousands of dollars in your pocket a year if no tax on tips were legislated. Social Security income, I don't believe Social Security income was originally taxed anyway. Like, I don't care. Don't tax Social Security. If it's going to give grandma like 200 more bucks a month, let her have it. Like, I don't give a fuck about that. I'm more concerned with the cuts to Social Security that are coming, with the cuts to Medicaid that are coming, with the tax hikes on low and middle income earners that are coming in this tax bill. But the Bannon wing is working to force the issue, saying it's time to raise that top rate on the wealthier households at least $1 million and above, sounding at times more like progressive Democrats. In fact, this kind of rhetoric is even more progressive than many Democrats in Congress. Bannon's flank sees a tax hike as a way not to only ensure wealthy Americans pay their fair share, but also to generate federal revenue. Cut to the Onion article of the worst person you know just made a good point. Steve Bannon, unfortunately, is correct on this issue, but he's not correct from like an ideological issue. Like, I'm not correct on this issue from an ideological issue. I'm correct on this issue from basic economics. With the federal debt at $36 trillion, they say it can help counter annual deficits that cannot be offset by budget cuts alone. The system we have is currently not sustainable, Bannon said. You have to go to an alternative. I think the alternative is budget cuts, and it has to be tax increases on the wealthy. This is appropriate budget balancing. Generating more revenue is easier than reducing your expenses. The United States has trillions of dollars of quote unquote debt that is necessary spending, as in you cannot get rid of it because there will be tangible consequences from its removal. If you raise taxes on wealthy people, if you do wealth taxes, if you raise taxes on billionaires and corporations and have like a baseline profits tax, you will pump more money into the system, which makes balancing the budget easier because you have more funds to allocate. The Republicans in Congress understand this. Well, maybe some of them don't because they're all fucking stupid. But people like Mike Johnson understand this, but they don't want to implement it because it is antithetical to their beliefs. They believe in capitalism. They believe in millionaires and billionaires being able to do whatever the fuck they want. This is like socialism. Steve Bannon is advocating for a little bit of socialism, and I agree with him in this instance. Unfortunately, I feel like I'm going to throw up having to agree with Steve Bannon, but he's correct. He's correct in this regard. That's drawing fierce blowback from the traditional tax cutters who have gone into overdrive, warning of nothing short of political shattering of GOP orthodoxy and the party itself if Republicans entertain this idea. Madness, Gingrich, the former House Speaker, told Fox News' Larry Kudlow. Gingrich warns of a George Bush-style political implosion similar to his "Read My Lips, no new taxes" pledge, which contributed to his failed 1992 re-election bid. It would be a disaster. I think, weirdly enough, well, actually, no, I don't think it's weirdly enough, but I think that the Republican Party, if we make it to 2028, is going to implode regardless. They have nobody who can replace Donald Trump, and the Republicans want they want as many Donald Trumps as possible. The reality of the situation is there is currently nobody in conservative politics that has the juice like Donald Trump has it. Ron DeSantis sucks. Tim Scott sucks. They're all boring. Nikki Haley sucks. Vapid. No charisma. Donald Trump Jr. doing blow all the time. Worst version of his dad. There is literally nobody who can pick up Trumpism and do Trumpism as effectively as Donald Trump. There is going to be serious fracturing in the Republican Party, I believe. And I know I'm looking out and I'm probably going to be wrong, but whatever. I think it would just be fun to see that political party implode because of their own stupidity. Trump appears to be weighing the argument, sending mixed messaging about what he prefers. Newt is quite possibly right on this, the president said in a note Gingrich said he received from the president, reposted on social media. While I love the idea of a small increase, the Democrats would probably use it against us, and we would be like Bush, helpless to do anything about it. What does that even mean? How would the Democrats use that against you? If the Democrats are that fucking stupid as to not want to raise taxes on the wealthy, their constituents would see that they're also fucking stupid. The only way that Democrats would use that against Republicans is that they don't go far enough. If Donald Trump proposed an increase of like 40% for top marginal earners or for people earning above $1 million, I would say that's not enough. I would like to see that. I think that would be a good step, but ultimately it should be higher than that. It should be severely higher than that. And remember, we're talking about marginal tax rates, as in any dollar you make over a certain threshold is taxed at that highest amount, not all of your income entirely. That's a misunderstanding that people sometimes have when you discuss tax rates, whether that's, whether they're just being ignorant or they're trying to be shady. Tax brackets function in the way that once you enter a new bracket, your new income is taxed at that new rate, not all of your income. Trump went on to counsel that if they can do without it, they're probably better off. We don't need to be the read my lips gang who lost an election. Asked about a tax hike on millionaires Wednesday in the Oval Office, Trump was more definitive. I think it would be very disruptive, he said, suggesting wealthy Americans would simply leave the country rather than pay higher taxes and end up costing in lost revenues. I see this argument floated around a lot, and it's really simple. You can't do business here. There you go. It's that easy. If you're a millionaire who's trying to evade a higher tax rate in the United States and you elect to leave, you are cut off from the American market. Are you going to want to do that? No. If you're a business person, right? If you have a fucking if you have some sort of successful company or whatever, and you leave because you don't want to get taxed, you will no longer be able to sell your product or service in the United States. You're missing out on the biggest consumer base in the country. That's the ultimatum you have to give these people. Yet in a Time magazine interview posted Friday, Trump said of a millionaire's tax, I actually love the concept, but I don't want it to be used against me politically. It would be used against you politically from Republicans, but even then, Republicans are too pussy to say anything negative to Donald Trump. The only person who would be critical of this is fucking Rand Paul, at least openly critical about it, because he's the only one who has a defined ideology in Republican politics. As Republicans in Congress work behind the scenes crafting the tax bill and at least $1.5 trillion in government spending cuts to help cover the lost revenues, it seems highly unlikely enough of them would agree to a tax hike. Most of the congressional Republicans have signed a no taxes pledge from Norquist's Americans for Tax Reform group, even as others signal some interest, with Democrats prepared to oppose the package altogether because of its expected steep cuts to federal programs. The Republicans will need to keep all their lawmakers in line if they hope to pass the bill through the House and Senate with the narrow majorities. Yet, as Republicans are scrounging for ways to pay their tax bill, they face potential resistance within their own ranks to reductions in Medicaid, food stamps, and other federal programs. Even an accounting measure preferred by the Senate Republicans, which would count the 2017 tax breaks as current policy rather than requiring an offset, still comes up short for covering the full price tag of the new package, which could swell beyond $5 trillion over 10 years. This is why I don't give a fuck when people ask me, oh, how are you going to pay for this? How are you going to pay for Medicare for all? How are you going to pay for this, that, whatever? Like, who gives a fuck? Republicans always operate on this. They, like, hello, they don't even know how they're going to fucking pay for this. How do we pay for an increased military budget every year? We just do it because money is fake and not real. Setting the new top rate at about 40% for those earning $1 million or above would bring in some $300 billion in revenue over the decade, analysts have said. Now imagine how much more it would be if it were higher than that. This is a conservative estimate at 40%. I'm looking for 90% over 3 million. I want to go back to the times of the 40s, the 50s, and 60s, just without Jim Crow and without no-fault divorce. That's what I want. I want the tax rates of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, but not the social issues of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, which objectively was the most prosperous time in the United States of America. You had a growing middle class. You had a robust middle class, a thriving middle class. You had relatively low income inequality. Of course, union membership was higher, and when union membership is higher, people have better wages, better benefits. That's the time that I want to go back to.